On a rainy day in May, here we are, Arctic Basecamp is back at the World Economic Forum. We're back at Davos because the Arctic keeps melting, because CO2 keeps rising. It's clear that Arctic change and polar change more generally will really determine the fate of humanity. We're about to kick off our week-long program here at the World Economic Forum.
Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2.
We are absolutely thrilled to be able to host Prince Albert II of Monaco, who is coming to do our keynote opening address.
We know how difficult it is to change the energy model. Yet it is only by this change that we'll be able to put an end to the greatest threat hanging over the poles, warming.
Our deserts are impacted by the polar regions. Our forests are impacted by the polar regions.
We know today the Arctic is warming faster than any other region on the planet, warming more than 3 times the global average. These changes are actually happening faster than many of our climate models have been able to predict. If you look at the Arctic sea ice cover, we're about 20 to 30 years ahead of where climate models say we should be.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right.
We're here at Arctic Basecamp in Davos, and we're here to present a new BBC programme that will be coming out on television in September.
It's our job not just to report the science, it's to grab all of you by your hearts and say, engage with this.
You kind of need to be angry about this, right? We're experimenting at a planetary scale and we're using human lives as a canary in the coal mine.
There's a much bigger movement out there than is sometimes represented. This moment and tipping point of change is at least culturally closer than sometimes it appears.
What we decided to do was actually bring Greenland meltwater between 14 and 17 million bottles a second are melting.
Nature-based solutions, nature climate solutions are perhaps the most important thing we can do, but we cannot use it as a way of hiding our inability to phase out fossil fuels. We have to do both.
We need to move from the thousands of companies that have committed to set science-based targets to the millions, and we can only do that through regulations.
So we are at risk of not producing enough food for the world, and I don't think we really understand the potential consequences of this.
Intelligence works best if it's collective intelligence. We have a collective challenge, so we need to find ways to share all that.
Today, Arctic Basecamp, we are launching our new Arctic Risk Platform.
We're focusing on 2 things within the Arctic Risk Platform. Basically, we want to focus on the global risks from what's happening in the Arctic, but also give us real up-to-date information on what is actually going on in the Arctic today.
Global decision makers can understand the risks that are related to that for their industry sectors and for their regions around the world.
Okay, I'm just arrived to Davos and I'm here to speak on behalf of science about climate change and the war in Ukraine and the roots. And they are actually in fossil fuels.
I'm in Davos to speak of a war in Ukraine because Europe is dependent on fossil fuels owned by dictators.
We have an obligation and an opportunity to bring global youth here into Davos so that they can share their messages to world leaders.
And my message here to the global political and business leaders is, please take action. The climate crisis is threatening not only my community in the Amazon region in Brazil, but the entire humanity.
The convening power here of Arctic Basecamp of bringing together youth from around the world is really helpful because it allows us to see perspectives of communities and territories that aren't necessarily in the mainstream conversation and consciousness.
The youth around the world are, they are living the impacts of climate change. So they've got an on-the-ground understanding of what this means, not just for them today, but what this means for their future. So that is something that we have to share with the delegates.
We're about to go in an open forum and Cassidy and I are going to speak there.
So we have indigenous people that are actively fighting the fossil fuel industry. What happens in the Arctic is connected to what happens to the Amazon. What happens in the Amazon is connected to what happens in the Arctic.
The monsoons are becoming erratic and also becoming extreme.
Marginalized communities, women, children, these are the populations that are being disproportionately impacted, specifically in the Middle East.
Because ice is the basis of life up there.
You know, I think that the climate science is solid. I think many decision makers believe in the science. I think the real question is, do they have enough courage to make those bold decisions that they know they need to make? We've seen that they did that with the pandemic. We've seen that they've done that with the war in Ukraine. The question is it now the time that we do this with climate change?